The hum of the alien ship's engines was a low, constant growl beneath the floor, vibrating through the humans' boots where they were chained to the metal chair. The chamber smelled of oil, burnt wiring, and something sharper. Fear, maybe. The lights above flickered sporadically, washing the interrogation room in short bursts of greenish glow. He sat there, slouched but alert, his bruised face half hidden by the shadows. Across from him, the alien officer moved with slow, deliberate steps, her taloned hands clasped behind her back. She wore the deep red armor of the Ascendancy's elite, the kind that usually made prisoners weep before the first question. She leaned in, close enough that he could see the black slits of her pupils narrow in irritation. "Why don't you fear us, human?" she asked, her voice dripping with disdain, the universal translator smoothing out her guttural words. For a moment, he didn't respond. His head lolled slightly to the side as if he hadn't heard. A cut on his temple was still bleeding sluggishly, but he didn't seem to notice. The officer straightened, scowling, then signaled to one of the guards. A long, thin prod crackled with energy and slammed into his side. His body jerked, muscles tightening painfully, but the only sound he made was a slow, rattling exhale. When the prod pulled back, leaving a scorched line across his ribs, he finally looked up. His eyes, impossibly calm, impossibly human, locked onto hers with a focus that made her shift uneasily on her feet. He smiled, slow and deliberate, and leaned back as far as his restraints would allow. His voice, when he finally spoke, was rough with dehydration but steady. "You think fear is something new to us?" he asked. The officer didn't reply, thrown off by the unexpected tone. He chuckled quietly, a sound that didn't match the situation at all, and it unnerved everyone in the room. The guards tightened their grips on their weapons. He saw it. He enjoyed it. "You're used to prey," he said, tilting his head just slightly. "Species that scream and beg and break before you even begin. You're used to easy victories." She stepped forward, hand tightening around the hilt of her ceremonial dagger, but something about his gaze made her hesitate. There was no panic there. No despair. Just an awful, quiet certainty. "Humans don't break the way you want us to," he continued, voice dropping lower. "Because by the time you even meet us on the field, we've already survived worse. We've survived ourselves." Another shock from the prod, sharper this time, made his body spasm again, but he laughed through it, the sound low and raw. One of the guards muttered something under his breath in their native tongue. The officer silenced him with a glare, but she couldn't hide the creeping sense of wrongness settling into her chest. She was supposed to be in control here. She stepped closer until she was towering over him, casting him in shadow. His smile widened just a fraction. "You're afraid and you don't even know why yet," he said softly, almost kindly. "You think you're predators. You think this is power." He rattled the chains lightly, almost playfully. "But you have no idea what real monsters look like." The officer opened her mouth to snap a retort but paused. There was something cold in the air now, something ancient and ugly, like a memory she didn't know she had. The human leaned forward slightly, the movement slow, deliberate, the cuffs grinding against the chair's frame. His voice dropped to a whisper that slid under her skin. "We were born in war. Raised by it. Perfected by it," he murmured. "You think I'm afraid of you? You haven't earned that yet." The chamber seemed to shrink around them, the buzzing lights overhead dimming even further. One of the younger guards actually took a step back, bumping into the wall with a soft curse. The officer's hand, still on the dagger, trembled ever so slightly. She hated herself for it. She hated the way his words slithered past her armor and into her mind, planting ugly seeds of doubt. The human leaned back again, as if satisfied he had said enough, the cold amusement never leaving his battered face. The officer straightened sharply, trying to reassert herself, but the balance of power in the room had shifted in a way she couldn't articulate. Somehow, in that small, dark moment, she realized she had made a mistake. This was not prey. This was not some weak species waiting to be conquered. This was something else entirely. And she had just poked it with a stick. The officer stormed out of the interrogation room, her steps sharp against the cold metal floor. She needed to clear her head, needed to get that human's voice out of her skull, but the echo of his words clung to her like smoke. In the hall, she grabbed a passing technician by the arm and barked an order for deeper scans, psychological, genetic, anything they could pull. She wasn't going to let a creature barely out of its primitive phase rattle her authority. She was still seething when the datapad came back 15 minutes later. It wasn't the results that caught her off guard, it was how little they could explain. No engineered resistances. No tampering. Just raw, ugly evolution shaped by millions of years of surviving horrors that made Ascendancy history look like a nursery rhyme. Humans didn't need enhancements. They were built for survival the old-fashioned way: trial, error, and endless bloodshed. Inside the interrogation room, the human remained as he was, bruised and bleeding but utterly at ease. His chains clinked softly when he shifted, relaxing like a man on vacation. One of the guards, younger, inexperienced, leaned in a little too close, perhaps thinking the human was weak now. The human's hand snapped out, grabbing the guard's wrist with shocking speed. A single twist and the guard was on the floor, screaming, arm bent at a hideous angle. The others rushed forward, weapons raised, but the human merely sat back, smiling like he'd proven a point. The officer returned just in time to see the aftermath. She motioned sharply, and the human was restrained again with additional locks and heavier chains. Still, he smiled at her like it was all a game. "You study us like bugs under glass," he said as they secured him, "but you never ask the right questions." She ignored him, turning to a control panel on the wall and ordering sedation gas into the room. A thin mist began to seep from vents near the ceiling. She watched carefully, waiting for signs of fatigue, of slowing breath. The human chuckled. He laughed as the gas thickened. It took her a moment to realize he wasn't even trying to hold his breath. He inhaled it deliberately, almost hungrily, and still, his gaze never left hers. "You want to know why you should be afraid?" he said, voice slow, dragging like it came from somewhere far deeper than his lungs. "It's because we like the pain. We adapt to it." His words were thick now, drugged but no less terrifying. "You think pain is a weapon. To us, it's training." His head tilted back, hitting the chair with a dull thud. For a moment, she thought he had finally succumbed, but then he spoke again, soft and terrible. "And when you realize you've only made us angrier, it'll be too late." The gas kept flowing. His heartbeat, displayed on a monitor nearby, slowed to an impossible calm. Not panic. Not resistance. Acceptance. He had simply folded the suffering into himself like a second skin. The officer ordered the gas flow stopped, her fingers trembling slightly as she keyed in the command. If they kept it up, the human would die, but not the way she wanted. Dead, he would be a warning. Alive, he was a lesson. She ordered the guards to leave. She needed space to think, to breathe. Alone in the room with him, she approached slowly, cautiously, as if nearing a wild animal pretending to sleep. She crouched in front of him, staring into the bruised ruin of his face. "What are you?" she asked, genuinely. Her earlier arrogance evaporated into curiosity and fear. His eyes cracked open, bloodshot but glinting with amusement. "Human," he whispered, as if it were the punchline to a joke she couldn't understand. She sat back heavily on her heels, staring at him. They had thought of humans as pests, a minor species to be subjugated and shaped. But she was beginning to understand they were something worse. Something that didn't fit into neat categories like ally or enemy. They were chaos wrapped in fragile skin. Minutes passed in silence. The human's breathing deepened into something like rest, but she could see the tension still coiled in his frame. He wasn't beaten. He was waiting. Planning. She realized with a sudden, awful certainty that he had come into this room already assuming he might not leave, and it hadn't changed his attitude one bit. No fear. No despair. Just an endless, stubborn defiance born from a history soaked in war, betrayal, and survival against the impossible. When she finally rose and left the room, she paused at the threshold, one hand resting on the cold metal frame. She looked back once, but the human didn't move. Didn't gloat. Didn't threaten. He simply sat there, eyes closed, as if daring her to imagine what would happen when the chains eventually broke. She walked away quickly, the door sealing shut behind her with a heavy hiss. She didn't notice how her hands shook until she reached the command station. Her superior was waiting for her, arms crossed, scowling at the data scrolling across a holographic screen. "Status," he barked. She swallowed hard before answering. "We've made a mistake," she said quietly, her voice steady only by sheer force of will. The superior frowned. "Explain." She met his gaze, her own cold with a new, terrible understanding. "Humans aren't a threat because they're strong," she said. "They're a threat because they survive anything." She hesitated only a second before adding, "And because when you push them far enough, they become something worse than any weapon we've ever seen." The ripple started small, like a stone dropped into a still pond. Rumors moved faster than any official report, and by the time the human was transferred to the holding cells aboard the Ascendancy's flagship, half the fleet already knew about the monster in chains. Soldiers whispered in the corridors, guards gripped their weapons tighter, and officers locked their doors at night. Some dismissed the fear as foolishness, but they spoke more softly when they did. Something was different now, something raw and primal gnawing at the edge of discipline. Even the ship's commander, a seasoned veteran who had crushed rebellions and quelled uprisings, found himself lingering outside the brig longer than necessary, watching the surveillance feeds with an unease he couldn't quite explain. He watched the human, bound and drugged, sitting unnaturally still in his cell, head bowed as if asleep. And yet, he never truly seemed unaware. Cameras caught the small things, the twitch of a finger, the shift of his shoulders, the way his eyes would sometimes crack open to scan the door as if waiting. When the order came down to transfer the human to the central processing center on the capital world, nobody volunteered to oversee the move. Eventually, a squad was assigned by lottery, and though they tried to hide it, their fear was palpable. They entered the brig in full armor, rifles ready, as if expecting the human to explode into violence the moment they entered. But he didn't. He merely rose slowly to his feet, chains rattling against his wrists and ankles, and regarded them with a look that made even the bravest among them hesitate. When they moved forward to secure him, he didn't resist. No threats, no snarls. Just a smile, that same cold knowing smile that seemed to peel back the layers of their courage and expose the trembling core within. The walk to the shuttle bay was a parade of tension. Every step the human took seemed measured, almost lazy, but none of the guards dared relax. The corridors emptied ahead of them without orders. Crew members fled at the sight of the human, as if his mere presence contaminated the air. It wasn't logical. It wasn't rational. It was instinct. Something deep inside them recognized the predator walking so calmly between them, the one who wore chains like jewelry and fear like a second skin. They loaded him into the shuttle quickly, locking him into a fortified containment unit. Double-sealed. Shock-proof. They stared at the locks for a long moment before stepping back, each of them wondering if even that would be enough. During the flight, the guards kept their rifles trained on the human even as turbulence rocked the shuttle. Every bump, every shake, sent their fingers twitching on the triggers. The human remained still, eyes half closed, mouth tilted in that maddening smirk. At one point, the youngest guard lost his nerve and barked a warning, telling the human to stay still, a pointless command, because he hadn't moved an inch. The human's eyes slid open fully then, pinning the young soldier in place. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The silence was heavier than a scream, a promise made without words. When they landed, a full security detachment awaited them. Heavy weapons, battle droids, command officers in gleaming armor. All for one man. It should have been absurd, and yet no one laughed. They disembarked carefully, forming a wall of shields and guns around the human. He walked with them, chains dragging, head high, surveying the gathered forces with something like pity. As if he already knew how little good their weapons would do when the time came. They entered the central processing center, an imposing building of black stone and metal, designed to break prisoners before they even saw the inside of a cell. The warden himself met them at the entrance, sneering as he looked the human up and down. "This is the creature causing all the fuss?" he asked loudly, trying to project confidence. The human said nothing. Just watched him with eyes like frozen knives. The warden stepped closer, leaning in as if daring the human to react. "You'll learn your place here, animal," he said, voice low and threatening. The human's smile widened by a fraction, just enough. No words. No outburst. Just a look, calm, patient, inevitable. The warden faltered, only slightly, but the damage was done. The others saw it. They smelled the fear. The human was processed like any other prisoner. Stripped, scanned, catalogued. But nothing about it felt routine. Technicians rushed through the procedures, avoiding eye contact, hands trembling as they keyed in data. When it came time to implant the suppression chip, standard for dangerous inmates, the chief technician hesitated at the final step. She glanced at the human, then at the warden, who balked an order to proceed. Swallowing her fear, she stepped forward, pressed the injector to the base of his neck, and triggered the implant. A faint hiss, a small flash of light, and nothing. The human didn't even blink. She stumbled back, heart hammering, and the human finally spoke, his voice a soft, deadly murmur. Putting a leash on a wolf doesn't make it tame. The technician fled the room. The warden sneered again, barking for the guards to take him to solitary. As they dragged him away, the human moved easily, chains rattling a soft, mocking rhythm. He made no move to resist. Not yet. But every step he took echoed with a silent promise, and deep down, even the bravest guards knew, this wasn't over. It was just beginning. Solitary confinement was supposed to be the final cage, the last insult to break the spirit of even the strongest prisoners. Deep beneath the processing center, carved into the bedrock, the cells were cold, dark, and silent. No light, no sound, only endless, suffocating isolation. They threw the human into the farthest cell, triple-sealed it behind electromagnetic locks, and left without a backward glance, pretending they hadn't seen the way he smiled as the doors closed. Cameras were set to monitor him constantly, but the feeds began glitching within the first hour. Static, flickering images, brief flashes of the human standing absolutely still, staring directly into the lens as if he could see through it. Technicians blamed faulty wiring at first. Then interference. Then sabotage. But none of them dared go down to fix it. Within 12 hours, guards began requesting transfers. Officers stopped sleeping. The warden ordered discipline drills and punishment shifts, but it didn't matter. Fear had sunk its teeth in deep, and the station was unraveling. The first real sign of trouble came when the night shift simply stopped responding. 24 guards, gone silent all at once. The warden dispatched a strike team to investigate, armed to the teeth, prepared for a prisoner revolt. They found the control room empty, the guards' equipment scattered across the floor, no blood, no signs of struggle, just a single word smeared onto the wall in something dark and oily. Run. The team leader, a grizzled veteran of 100 campaigns, radioed in a frantic report before the feed cut to black. Panic spread faster than fire. Senior staff tried to evacuate, but the shuttle bays wouldn't open. Doors sealed themselves. Lights flickered and died. Somewhere, deep below, a low vibration started, like the growl of something massive waking from a long sleep. The warden, sweating and snarling orders no one obeyed, demanded to know how the human had escaped containment. The answer came when the intercom crackled to life, broadcasting a slow, deliberate tapping sound, chains hitting the ground, over and over, a mocking heartbeat. No one saw him move. One moment the human was locked in solitary. The next, he was everywhere at once. A shadow slipping through hallways, a whisper in the dark, a cold breath on the back of your neck. Security drones picked up flashes of movement too fast to track, a hand dragging across a wall, a silhouette turning a corner, the gleam of a smile in total darkness. Guards tried to form defensive lines, but they turned on each other at the slightest provocation, nerves shredded by the unseen predator hunting them. Some tried to hide, barricading themselves inside armories and med bays, but the locks failed one by one. When the doors slid open, they screamed, but no one came to help. By the time the warden finally armed the base's auto-turrets and activated the self-destruct contingency, it was too late. The command center was already compromised. Screens flickered and died, systems rebooted endlessly, and every monitor showed the same thing. The human, standing alone in the center of the brig, surrounded by shattered restraints, head tilted as if listening to music only he could hear. He didn't rush. He didn't roar. He walked, slowly, methodically, toward the camera, until his face filled the screen. He lifted one finger to his lips and made a shushing gesture. Then the feed cut to black. In the end, only a handful of survivors staggered out of the ruins of the processing center, broken and incoherent, babbling about eyes in the dark and laughter that wasn't laughter at all. They were picked up by rescue teams days later, half-starved, too terrified to speak the human's name. The Ascendancy's High Council ordered an immediate information lockdown. Officially, the incident never happened. The center had been destroyed by a reactor malfunction. No prisoners escaped. No enemies infiltrated. No human ever set foot in their maximum security facility. It was cleaner that way. Easier. Safer. But rumors, like infection, are impossible to quarantine once they take root. Soldiers whispered of a ghost in chains. Officers posted warnings in hidden forums. And somewhere, far beyond the stars, in the cold dark of space, a new phrase entered the universal lexicon of terror. Not an official title, not a code name, a warning, passed from mouth to mouth, growing darker with each telling. Don't provoke the humans. Don't corner them. And for the love of all that lives, never, ever make them angry. Because sometimes, the worst monsters don't snarl or roar. They smile.